Right, let reflect we are back in session. Parties and counsel are present. All members of our jury and our alternates are present. Before we call our next witness, the jury's had a couple of questions about some of our admonishments about not discussing the case or anything about the case. So let me go over that a little bit. You wanted some clarifications about what you can or cannot talk about. For instance, can you talk about how long the trial has lasted, or when you think the or expect the defense might finish, why we take so many days off, who's in the audience, which people may be family or reporters or witnesses, how interesting or tedious certain court testimony is, what the judge or lawyers are doing during testimony or discussing at sidebar. Basically, you really shouldn't be discussing or even speculating about any of that. And the reason for that is it may not seem like you're talking about the case itself or deciding things, but when you start talking about things like that, it can affect the way you look at the evidence. For example, if you start saying, boy, that testimony was really boring, it was really tedious, you may be if you talk about it, you may be forming an opinion that it really wasn't very important and kind of disregard it. And there might be other evidence that comes in later, or maybe with the help of the closing statements, it all gets put together and you might see maybe it was more important than it originally seemed. But if you've already talked about it, you already said, boy, that was really boring, it didn't make any sense, it wasn't important, then you might not be as receptive to that kind of a connection. So it's better that you not talk about it and not speculate about it. Wait until the case is given to you to begin your deliberations, and then you can talk about all the evidence you want and what you think is important and what you think is not important. Likewise, when the court is at sidebar with the attorneys, there's something called the evidence code that has a whole bunch of rules about evidence, about what is acceptable and proper evidence, what is not acceptable evidence, what some of the foundation or thresholds that need to be met for evidence. And normally when the attorneys are up here talking, we're talking about that and whether or not something meets those rules of evidence or not. And again, you really shouldn't be concerned with that. If I ultimately determine, no, that doesn't fall within the rules of evidence, then you don't hear it, and there's a good reason why you're not hearing it. On the other hand, if I say, yeah, it falls within the rules of evidence, you're entitled to hear it, then you will hear it. But if you start speculating, well, I wonder why they're objecting to that, or I wonder why the judge is going the way he is, then again, that might interfere with your ability to look at all of the evidence when you actually hear it. Even things like, well, when is the defense going to be finished, or is the prosecution going to do anything after that? When is the trial going to end? Again, discussions or speculation about that might make you less receptive to the importance of some of the evidence that's coming in. So again, try not to speculate about it, try not to think about it. We try to give you updates as best we can. As I indicated, I think we are still on track to get the case to you to begin your deliberations by the end of this month. That's our goal. I think my impression is from talking with the attorneys, we are still on track for that. So that gives you kind of an idea of where we are on that. So I hope that gives you an idea. Basically, when we say don't discuss anything about the case or any of the witnesses or testimony or parties or attorneys, that includes everything about what's going on. Just don't talk about it, don't speculate about it. Also, during testimony, there's a lot going on. The attorneys are asking questions, the witnesses are answering questions, court reporters trying to get it down. The attorneys sometimes are talking among themselves about what they want to do or what they might do with when it's their turn to ask questions, what reports they have. And if you start talking among yourselves at the same time, it can be distracting. The court reporter might miss something, the attorneys might miss something, the witness might miss something. So even if it seems boring and tedious, try not to be talking among yourselves during testimony. When we're up at the sidebar, if you want to talk very quietly among yourselves, you probably can, as long as you're not talking about the case, what you think we're doing up here. But again, if you start talking too loud, I'm trying to listen to the attorney. We're kind of whispering so you don't hear. And so if they're whispering to me and I'm whispering to them, and we hear you guys talking, then it's kind of distracting to what we're doing. But if it's below that level, probably not a problem. So I hope that answers most of your questions. In terms of who else is in the courtroom, there may be, as I indicated at the very beginning of the trial, there may be friends or family of Mr. Merritt present. There may be friends or family of the McStay family present from time to time. There may be just people who are interested in the trial stopping in to watch part of it for a while. Again, none of that should be a concern of yours. You shouldn't be talking with anybody. Okay, if you see anyone in the courtroom or even people out in the hallway, you shouldn't be talking to them in the courthouse. Okay, I mean that's just a good rule of thumb. Because you never know who someone is, and someone might say something to you about the weather or where someone's going on the weekend. You have a nice conversation that has nothing to do with anything, and it turns out that's a witness in the case, or it turns out it's a family member of one side or another. And then someone says, oh, I saw one of the jurors talking to someone. Well, now we got to find out, who are you talking to? What were you talking about? Is that going to make any difference to you now? So again, good rule of thumb, don't talk to anybody here, okay? That answer most of your questions, I hope? Yes, any other questions along those lines? Anybody, anything? No? Okay. And our next witness was coming in from out of town. He was supposed to be here by 1:30, but I guess he got a little delayed getting here between the airport and traffic, but he is here now, is that right?
She is, yes.
Oh, she is. I have a 50-50 shot. Sure you. How I do it on, but all right, you may call your next witness.
The defense calls Christina Nash.
Christina Nash, Christina, Nash.
Okay, you may proceed.
Mrs. Nash, by whom are you employed?
I'm employed by Bodhi Technology.
And do you have any specific education that allows you to hold it?
Yes, I'm currently a senior DNA analyst at Bodhi Technology. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in Forensic Science from Virginia Commonwealth University and a Master's of Science in Forensic Science from the same university.
In your undergraduate and graduate coursework, did you take any specialized courses concerning DNA?
Yes.
Could you summarize the important ones that you felt are necessary for your employment?
Yes, population statistics, genetics, chemistry, molecular biology, and extensive statistics.
And As a senior DNA analyst with Bodie, what do you generally do?
I generally process items of evidence received at our facility from different agencies around the world. We are processing those items, looking for DNA. We issue reports on our results, and we make comparisons and statistical calculations if needed.
So, let me see where you are in the chain of DNA analysis. Let's just say this water bottle is collected from a scene. So there's an officer that collects it, right?
Yes, usually.
And then there'd be some technician that will see if we can sample this for any kind of DNA on it, and they can do any one of numerous techniques of doing that, correct?
Yes.
And then whatever they use, or however they sample this for DNA, that's packaged up and sent to a lab. Would that be fair to say?
Correct.
And would that be your job at that point?
Yes. Most evidence arrives via common carrier or is hand delivery, and we receive evidence all the time.
Okay. So when you process and analyze, is part of it also interpreting DNA results?
Yes, mixture interpretation as well as the comparisons.
And would that be manual interpretation? We've heard the term?
Yes, manual as in I'm physically doing it. No computer assistance with interpreting the mixtures. We do analyze using genetic software.
And when you say analyze, you say something's put in, there's some kind of function going on inside a machine, it gives you raw data readouts, and then that comes out. That's the analyze part?
Yes, so that data, that raw data that comes off our instrumentation after a sample has gone through the DNA workflow is what I analyze to issue my final report and make electropherograms, or EPGs for short.
And what kind of machine would you use to analyze a substance as one that was done in this case?
Well, we use many instruments, but for our analysis software, we use GeneMapper IDX. This data allows us to read the raw data of our 3500 instrumentation, and then we're able to size the alleles that we see.
And
the alleles.
In the 3500 instrument that you mentioned, can you, in just basic terms for me, what's it kind of do?
So for the DNA workflow process, we have a couple steps. We are sampling the evidence, the item of evidence, just a small portion. We're extracting that possible DNA from the evidence. We're quantifying to estimate how much DNA is present. We're amplifying to make copies of the locations we're interested in. And then we're separating that data. The separation happens on our 3500s, which are genetic analyzers. A small portion of the amplified DNA is run on the instrumentation, and it separate out the small DNA fragments that we want to see.
And so you take all this data, it runs through your program to give you kind of a analysis of it that you can interpret. That'd be fair to say?
Yes, it gives us the raw data form, which we're able to analyze and determine what's true alleles versus what's not.
And then after that all happens, then you start documenting.
Correct.
And how do you document things?
For this particular step, we are printing those EPGs or electropherograms off after we've analyzed them. That data is then analyzed by a second analyst to verify our calls.
Did you take notes on all the steps you're doing as you're going through the whole process?
Yes, from beginning to end, once the evidence arrives in the door till the day we ship it back and the issuing of the final report, we document as we would direct it in our standard operating procedures.
And when you mentioned standard operating procedures, are the procedures that you must follow for every step through the process?
Yes, these are validated and tested procedures that we have to stick to obtain consistent and reliable results.
Now, the items are the procedures and everything that you just talked about that would happen. Do you train other individuals how to do that as a senior DNA analyst?
Yes, I am responsible for training newer analysts and tech reviewing their final work as well.
And do you also lead projects with other analysts working under you?
Yes, I lead multiple projects from all over the country, different agencies sending us cases, and I assign the work within our team as needed.
And is it common for you to testify in court for results that you obtain?
Yes.
And how often have you testified approximately?
Approximately 26 or 27 times in Texas, Virginia, Pittsburgh, Los Angeles, San Bernardino now, Mariner Islands, which is an island very far away, and I believe I said Texas already. Yes. So multiple different areas. Lots of times we don't need to go testify, but when we're called, we try to make it out.
So you travel all around?
Yes.
So the lab you have, is it just one location?
Yes, our main headquarter lab is in Lorton, Virginia, which is maybe 30 or 45 minutes outside of DC, Washington, DC.
And you flew here this morning?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Now, when you testify, is it generally for any particular side on criminal cases?
Well, it's generally an 80-20 split. Most of the times we are receiving evidence from police agencies or attorneys. So oftentimes we are testifying for the prosecution, but we also testify for defense and also innocent projects.
Now, are you proficient in different kind of software that could be used in helping your analysis of different DNA samples?
Yes.
Can you go through the ones you've used in this case, other ones that could have been used, and explain how they're related, like you said, something for amplification or identification or what?
Yes, so the instrumentation we use for interpretation and mixture interpretation, like I stated, we use the 3500, which is a genetic analyzer that helps us visualize the amplified DNA that we're testing. When we interpret those mixtures, we do a manual calculation that allows us to make comparisons, we'll make statistical results once we make comparisons. There are probabilistic genotyping softwares available now that allow aid in mixture interpretation. I'm currently trained in StarMix, which is another probabilistic genotyping software.
And when did you become, well, let me ask this. When did Bodie start using probabilistic genotyping software?
We started using that software for real cases early in January. Training was extensive and has been going on since about last July.
When you say January, you mean this year yet?
Yes.
And have you gone to any continuing education or training seminars to continue in your development as a DNA analyst?
Yes, we're required to perform quarterly literature reviews on scientific articles that have been published in the community. We also are, again, required to meet a certain number of continuing education hours. Most analysts only are needed to obtain 8 hours. I have to obtain 12 hours, which involves going to different trainings, such as the StarMix training I went to, and different conferences held by the larger organizations in forensic science, such as the American Academy of Forensic Science meetings or the Mid-Atlantic meetings throughout.
And now, Bodie, it used to be Bodie Selmar, correct?
Yes.
And now it's Bodie Technology?
Yes, so we went back to Bodie Technology.
Is Bodie Technology, is that a certified lab?
It's an accredited lab, yes.
Accredited lab, yes.
Yes.
Who does the accreditation?
Our current accreditation is through the American Society of Crime Lab Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board. They come and perform audits of our lab to make sure that we're following the SOPs that we have written, and all our documentation is up to par.
Next to SOP is?
Standard operating procedures.
And were you an accredited lab when you did all the analysis in this case?
Yes.
And you have contracts in with different government agencies?
Yes. The contracts are handled by other people in our lab. I don't handle any of the billing type issues.
but you have government agencies that will send you work that you can report back to them.
Yes.
And based on those contracts to do government work, does it require a different accreditation than the one you have as just a private lab?
No, the ASCLAB Laboratory Accreditation Board accreditation is what's required by any lab that wants to potentially have their data uploaded into CODIS.
And can you spell the acronym for the accreditation you just said?
ASCLAB. ASCLAB. ASCLAB Lab, American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board.
Just doing it for the court. And I assume Bodie, well, I shouldn't say assume. Where does Bodie rank on the size of private lab countrywide?
We're one of the top private labs in the country.
And by top, you mean one of the one that produces the most results or has the most staffing?
Yeah, so we're considered a high throughput lab. Most of our work is on backlog sexual assault cases. The team I work on specializes in customized cases, one-off cases, and rush cases, cases that need more hand-holding or multiple rounds of testing. That's what my team is involved in.
And so you're getting old samples from sex kits that are done in a collection from a sexual assault victim?
Yes, some of the testing in our lab is backlog sexual assault kits that have been found in warehouses that have been stored over many years. There's been legislation to put us to have all those kits tested.
And this could be from anywhere in the nation?
Absolutely.
So it's fair to say you're used to seeing old, properly stored evidence.
Yes.
And do you have any memberships in any associations related to your employment?
Yes, I'm a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. You have to apply to get in, you need recommendations to be admitted, and they issue ethics and help with continuing education that we're required to have.
And have you ever been involved in any presentations or group discussions with the American Academy of Forensic Sciences?
Yes.
How many times?
3 times.
And what is the general discussion on the presentations or panels you've been involved in?
The discussion was on my graduate research at the time, my thesis project, which is microRNAs. These are RNAs that we're trying to use to identify body fluids. That research is ongoing still at the university that I attended, but all my presentations were on that.
I want to move to another subject. Are you familiar with the term of degraded DNA or DNA degradation?
Yes.
Can you explain what that is?
Yes. Degraded DNA is DNA that is chopped up in a manner that it makes it much more difficult for us to amplify it properly and obtain a consistent profile for comparisons.
So if you have degraded DNA, is there things you can look for to determine if you have degraded DNA?
Yes. After looking at the data, of course, and seeing a particular ski slope effect, when we show the EPGs, I can go further into that. But we can see the heavier DNA pieces begin to break up, so they don't produce a full allele. So we lose data towards the end of the profile. This usually happens when evidence is exposed to the elements or is very old, it's degraded.
And what about contamination? Is there contamination in DNA?
Yes.
And what are some of the things that you look for to see if the DNA has been contaminated?
Well, for contamination, we are processing our evidence as normal, and we're instituting controls throughout the process. So negative controls, positive controls, and reagent blanks. Negative controls and reagent blanks should be clean from beginning to end. And if we see any indication of DNA being present, that would indicate a contamination event. In that instance, we will reprocess evidence to report the needed profiles. Also, all the profiles generated are searched against our staff database, so people who work in the lab who may have left DNA behind, and our visitor database to make sure that we have no extraneous DNA in our evidence.
And let's say, again, we'll go back to this water bottle. Let's say I'm here to collect it. I have my rubber gloves on. I got a full hazmat suit or something like whatever it is. And I watch English TV and they wear a full suit when they're doing stuff. And I pick it up and I take it to the lab samples it. They're wearing all their gear. They take their sample and they properly store it to where it doesn't degrade by environment. If that is sampled, is there a way to determine, or is there signs to look for, see if something was contaminated in the collection or the processing of an item?
If an item is properly collected and stored and then processed in the same manner with all the appropriate controls, we wouldn't expect to see contamination.
But is there a way to identify contamination in items sometimes?
Yes, if we have the proper comparison tools that we use, such as our staff search and our visitor search. If it's a contamination outside of those individuals, then we wouldn't be able to source such a thing.
Now, we had testimony before and they discussed an analytical threshold. Can you just basically define what that is for the jury so we know we're on the same page?
Yes, so we have two thresholds that are actually set based on our validation data in our lab, and they're used to help us be confident that a peak in an EPG, an electropherogram, is a true allele. The analytical threshold is the threshold that's set in which we're confident that a peak is a true allele and is separate from baseline noise. So we're confident that it's not baseline noise and that it is possibly a true peak, a true allele.
I was just saying, what's your analytical threshold as you validated for the machinery that you used in your lab?
So for this case, we use the Glover kit on the 3500 genetic analyzer, and that analytical threshold is 125. 125. 125 RFU. So the letters RFU. So those are relative fluorescent units, and that's just the measure we're detecting when the DNA is cycling through our instrumentation.
So if we had another analyst on here that testified that their analytical threshold was 50, that's just because of what software and what hardware they use that they validated for. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, that would be based on their lab's operating procedures and what they saw during their validation data. That's why each lab is required to do their own internal validation, because there's differences in climate, in processing and SOPs. So we want to make sure that the peaks that we're calling alleles are true in nature.
And you were going to, I think, talk about another threshold?
Yes, so the stochastic threshold. So if the analytical threshold's here at 125, the stochastic is here at 600 RFU for this particular kit. So if you imagine this mic is a peak. So here's 125, here's 600. So anything below 125, we can't be confident is a true allele. So if the peak becomes over 125, we can say that's a true allele, but we can't be confident that it's homozygous. A homozygous means it's the same number twice. So you get half of your DNA from your mother and half from your father. If for some reason you got the same allele from both parents, you would be homozygous. If the peak, okay, you get the picture. If the peak is over 600, we can be confident that in a single source sample that the profile at that location is homozygous. So such as a 1515. Now this is in a single source sample.
Can you spell homozygous just for the recording?
HOMOZYGOUS.
Now, speaking of this case in particular, does this case have a case number?
Yes, the Bodie case number that this case was assigned was CCA 1845-0058.
And for this case number, did you receive multiple MVAC filters that were labeled from Federal Express?
Yes.
And were those received under Federal Express number 7717-6616-2370?
7717-6616-2370?
Yes.
Yes, on March 12th, 2018.
And let me ask this, what filters were contained within?
There were 10 filters, 10 MVAC filters. Would you like the agency sample number or the description?
Well, there's 10 of them. We'll go through each individual one.
Okay.
Instead. And from the agency item numbers, you translate those into a sample number for yourself. Is that fair to say?
Correct. So each, like I said, each case is given a unique case number. This is how we track the case through our lab with our chain of custody. And once we have that case in the lab and we're taking samples from those items of evidence, each sampling gets an item number as well.
And so I assume after the MVAC filters were received, you processed each one individually?
Yes.
And could you go through the process of what you did just from, let's say, I hand you a filter. Can you explain what happened?
Yeah, so we work in a team approach. So once the case is assigned to me, I enlist the help of technicians to help with processing, but I direct all processing. Initially, the items of evidence are arrived at our evidence department. A chain of custody is initiated, and a unique case number is given. Supervisor of the group is then notified, hey, you have a new case with this turnaround time. It's being assigned to so-and-so. Please begin processing. That item of that case is picked up from our evidence team, which is tracked by our chain of custody, and is taken into the lab. Our lab is a secure facility, and it's a sterile environment. We are wearing protective equipment when we go into that lab, and we're inventorying the items of evidence. So this means we're looking at each item of evidence, one at a time, individually, and taking a small cutting of each item of evidence, or consuming it if we have permission for DNA processing.
And you did that in these cases for each item?
This was conducted on each of these items.
Okay, so you take a filter, you cut it up, you, I assume, dissolve it in some kind of liquid or something?
So after sampling is the extraction method. For extraction, that small cutting is pasted in a sterile tube, and chemicals are added to help break open the cells that may be present and release any DNA that's there. So that's our extraction. After extraction, we quantify the amount of DNA present. This is an estimate of how much DNA our instrumentation is reading to let us know if there is DNA present and how much. After quantitation, we're amplifying the DNA. That's when we're making millions, billions of copies of the locations we're interested in. In this particular kit, 21 locations were tested, as well as the sex-determinant region and amylogenin. After amplification, we are on to separation. So we talked about separation already. That's on the genetic analyzer. That's when those small millions and billions of copies of DNA are separated so that we can visualize the allele calls.
And then after all that's done, is it fair to say raw data is produced from the instrument?
Yes.
And then what happens to that raw data?
That raw data is exported off the instrument, and then at that point, I will analyze that data, determine what reprocessing needs to be done, if any, determine if my controls reacted appropriately, and then I'm looking at the profiles and determining, one, how many people are in that profile potentially, is that profile suitable for comparisons, and then if it is, we will process references if submitted for comparisons.
So you take the raw data and you put it through the software, and it kicks out, which you kept calling an EPG.
EPG, which is just shorthand for electropherogram, is basically a graph. It's basically a graph that, again, we're visualizing the peaks of the DNA profile.
And EPGs were produced in this case, correct?
Yes, for each sample, each sample has an EPG produced.
I'm going to show you the increase mark exhibit 1010. Do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes, these are the electropherograms that I produced of the data obtained from the MVACs.
Now, all the process that you did up to this point to produce the EPGs, did you follow all your standard operating procedures as established by Bodie to get to this point?
Yes.
Now I want to go to the electropherograms by sample item.
Okay.
I'm going to do them up electronically so we don't have to squint at a piece of paper.
Okay.
If we can go to computer 4. If we can turn down the lights just by the screen. And you can see the television screen in front of you. There is a pointer, and you can hit the button if you want to ever highlight anything for the jury to see. Now the first EPT we're looking at, which sample is this?
This is sample EO1. This is described as an MVAC from an electrical board.
Is that item E15?
Yes, agency sample item E15, Bodie item number EO1.
After processing this, was there any DNA data that was above your analytical threshold?
No.
And so it's fair to say there's no data in your analysis.
This would be reported as a no results profile. There's no data that meets our threshold, so it would be reported as no results.
Now this sample E1, you would have done a quantification of the amount of DNA present.
Yes.
Do you have those notes with you?
Yes.
Would you be able to tell me what the quantification results were for sample E01?
So for sample E01, our human autosomal is less than 0.001 nanograms per microliter, and our male quantitation is nothing, negative for male.
So the human was less than 0. How many zero?
001. This is a number that we have validated as a stop at quant. So for our clients that allow us to stop processing at this point, because we've advised them that we likely won't obtain any comparable data, this will be a sample that will be stopped. Other clients, like on the customized casework team, they want everything processed regardless.
Now, there's no data that meets your analytical threshold, but can we still see, some kind of spikes or activity on this sample?
Yes.
And can you identify for the jury the different locations that we could see what we'd be talking about?
So we have D3. There's peaks there. Again, this was reported as no results because nothing reaches our analytical threshold. At amylogenin, which is our sex-determining region, here you'll either have an XX or XY, depending on your flavor. D8 peaks here. Again, not above our analytical threshold. D2, D19, THO1. THO1, that's a TH01. D22, that's D3. D5, D10, and D12. There are peaks there, but again, this is reported as no results. We can't do anything with this data based on our validated SOPs.
So your simple report would say just no results possible.
Yes, our report says no DNA profile was obtained from sample EO1.
Let's go into sample EO2. Did you receive any DNA data from this sample?
No, this sample was also reported as no results.
And did you do a quantification of this one?
Yes.
And what was the result of that?
This sample, no human DNA was detected, no male DNA was detected. So this is blank across the board. No DNA detected by our instrumentation.
And just to be clear, sample E02, which item was this?
This is item A-2A, an MVAC filter collected from panties.
And is there any, even though they're below your analytic threshold, is there any spikes that you can kind of point out, like, well, this could be something, but we can't say it's illegal?
Yes, so at D16 and at D7. So we call these peaks, and once they're above our analytical threshold, we call them illegals. A spike is more of an instrument electrical malfunction, well, you'll have a spike throughout the whole profile. So just for clarification, these are peaks below our analytical threshold.
And the last egram that's here on the bottom right, we're going to see that multiple times. What is that?
Yes, so this is our orange channel. It's referred to as our internal lane sizing standard, and it's basically a ladder that we use, size standard, along with the ladder to help us size when we have allele calls. On future EPGs, you'll see where we have allele calls that is determined by the ladder and the sizing standard working together.
So, in sample E3, were you able to obtain results?
Yes, we obtain a partial profile.
Now I'm going to show up the results first. Would this be a representation of your report showing what the results were for sample E3?
Yes.
And what is sample E3? What item is that?
That is item A-3A, and it's an MVAC from the left cup/side of a black bra.
And so, let's look at, these are the results that you typed up, correct?
Yes, these are the final allele calls.
So these are alleles that you can make. Which ones are we seeing here based on your results?
We have a 14 allele at D3. So these are loci. The singular is locus. So at the D3 locus, we obtain a 14 allele above our analytical threshold, but below our stochastic threshold. This is what the dash 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 means. That means there's possible additional DNA that's not being detected. For VWA through Y indel, we have no data above our analytical threshold. At amylogenin, this is the sex determining region. We have an X and an X. So there's an X allele present that's above our stochastic threshold.
And let me ask you, when you have an XX like that, can you make a possible finding on anything on that?
Not comparison-wise, no. But because it reaches our stochastic threshold, there's a potential that there's a female contributor contributing to the partial DNA profile.
So we could say possible female contributor.
Correct.
Okay. What other results do you see? And when you're referring to the loci, you're just reading really the first two numbers.
Right. Yeah. These are just specific locations on the DNA, but the number you need here is the D19, D2.
Okay.
Those refer to the actual locations we're looking at.
The next one you see then was at D2?
At D2, yes. So similar situation to the first locus. There's a 14 that's above our analytical but below our stochastic. D19, we have a 13 and 14. The 1, we have a 9.3. Again, it's above our analytical but below our stochastic. These dashes indicate a possible additional alleles, so DNA that might not be detected. And when we look at the EPG for this sample, it's indicative of a mixture.
And yet, can you finish out?
So the same scenario for THO1, 9.3, and possible additional alleles. FGA, so 21, and possible additional alleles. D22, and 11, and possible additional alleles. At D5, we have no results. At D13, we have a 9 allele, but again, it's below our stochastic, so there's a potential for additional alleles to be present. D7, SC33, no results. D10, we have a 14 and a 15 allele. D1, D12, and D2, S1, 338, no results.
And so based on the results you see here, following your guidelines and protocols, can you reach any conclusions with it?
No. We had to report this as a partial profile due to the low-level nature and possible dropout. We can't make any conclusions.
So if I give you a known, profile and say, hey, is that person there?
We wouldn't be able to do any comparisons.
You say, that's nice, keep it?
Correct. So even if we had the refs to compare this to, we would never be able to do that comparison based on our SOPs.
Now let's go to the EPGs for this. Can you explain kind of, again, the peaks instead of spikes that you're seeing that are not recorded above your analytical threshold? Let me make some, let's describe something before you do that.
Okay.
The peaks that are identified as an allele, are those clearly marked on this exhibit?
Yes.
And could you show how they're marked for the jury?
Yes, so at D3, a 14 allele is marked. The software is calling this an allele because it's above our analytical thresholds. The 14 is the actual allele number, meaning 14 repeats at that location. And 174 is the RFU. So this is above 125, so our software is calling this. And when we analyze it, we verify that that call is truly above 125.
What's that big spike to the right of it?
This big spike was replicated throughout the data, and it was determined to be a bacterial artifact. We see that in samples that have been obtained from the dirt or from fecal material. We get weird amplification artifacts that sometimes present themselves as this. So this peak would have been, is obviously calling above our analytical and stochastic threshold, but because we know that it was an artifact, it's removed from the EPG.
Can you go through some other peaks? Dan, can you go through the EPG and explain the peaks that you're seeing for the jury?
Yes, so VWA, we have a peak again below analytical, so no calls, no results. D16, no results. CSF, no results. And TPOX, no results. Y-indel, no results. Amylogenin, our sex determining region, we have one X allele. The X is at a 610. Remember, our stochastic threshold is 600. So this would be reported as an XX. At D8, we have 3 peaks here below analytical threshold. None of these call, and we'll see throughout some of these locations there's 3 peaks. This is again is indicative of a mixture, but because it's so partial, again we can't make conclusions on it. At D21, D18, and DYS 391, no results. D2, we have a peak that doesn't meet our threshold, and then we have an allele at 163, a 14 allele. At D19, we have two alleles that meet our threshold, and 1 peak that doesn't. Again, this is indicative of a mixture. Like I said, you get half of your DNA from your mother, half from your father. At most, in a single source, clean profile, you would expect to see 1 or 2 peaks. No more than that, unless you have some sort of mutation that has a duplication or a triallele. So when we see multiple peaks like this, this is indicative of a potential additional contributor. For THO1, again, we have a 9.3. It's at 258 RFU. And then we have a peak that doesn't meet threshold. FGA, 21 at 126 RFU. And another peak that doesn't meet threshold. At D22, we have the 11 at 143, and we have 2 additional peaks well below threshold, but they are separated from baseline. In D5, again, 2 peaks, no thresholds met. D13, a 9 at 127, and an additional peak here. D7, 2 peaks. SE33, this is more like high baseline noise. The morphology of this isn't great. D10, we have two true peaks here, 14 and 15. We have additional information here and additional information over here. All below our threshold. D1, potential peak there. D12, 2 additional peaks there. And at D2, 1 additional peak there.
Now you said something about a slope.
Yeah, so a degradation slope. So in a sample that again, is stored out in the elements, or it's been an extensive amount of time since it's been collected and tested, we can see the effects of degradation. So again, we're chopping up, the environment is chopping up the larger pieces of DNA. So what you'll begin to see is that on the smaller end, so just for scale, these are RFUs, relative fluorescent units. So this is telling us how strong a peak is. Along this x-axis is the size. So 70 base pairs, 140 base pairs, 210 base pairs. So smaller pieces of DNA are harder to break up. So we usually get data on this end. With samples that degrade, the larger pieces begin to break off and you'll get a ski slope effect. So across the channels, the DNA is breaking down. Like we have data here and it's disappearing here. We have data here, it's gone here. Same thing. Same on this side. We barely have data on this side, and there's a ski slope effect. The heavier the DNA becomes, the longer the fragments, the more likely they're chopped up. So there's not enough DNA to press them above the thresholds that we have set. So we have this effect of less results, less results, less results.
That's an indication to you of degradation.
Yes.
And did you do a quantification of sample E3?
Yes. E3 quantified at 0.00128 nanograms per microliter for human autosomal DNA. And for male DNA, no male DNA was detected.
Not a lot.
Not a lot either. We like to target 1.00 nanograms. These samples are quantifying at less than 0.001, or like I said before, 0.00128. So a threefold away from what we would want to target in our amplifications.
Let's go on to sample 4. Sample E04, what item is this?
E04 is item A-1A. This is an MVAC filter collected from black NYL sweaters, sweatpants.
And were you able to obtain a profile from, or any DNA results from this item?
No, this item was reported as no results. We have no data above our set thresholds.
And did you do a quantification of this item?
Yes, for E04, our quantification value was less than 0.001 nanograms per microliter for a human autosomal, and no male DNA was detected.
And now we have the EPG on this, correct?
Yes.
Is there any peaks within the EPG that are worth noting?
Well, there are peaks at amylogenin and D8, as well as D18 and D2. A little bit of info over here, but again, this would be reported as no results, so we can't make any conclusions to data that looks like this.
Not much there.
Right.
Okay. Sample E05. What item is that?
E05 is E11A. That's an MVAC filter collected from a white cord.
And do you have DNA results from this?
Yes, so this sample quanted at less than 0.001 nanograms for human autosomal, and also less than 0.001 for human male. So this sample was inconclusive for male DNA. The other samples we talked about before have been negative because no male DNA was detected. This sample is concluded as inconclusive for male DNA because we don't have enough DNA to say that there's male present.
And so, but you did get some kind of partial profile?
Yes, for E05 we obtained a partial profile containing at least one male because we have Y amplification markers that are present in our EPG. These are at Y indel. Only males have these Y markers. And DYS 391. There's no results here, but we have indication of potential male DNA here. As only a male would be able to give a result at that location.
And with the presentation that's out there, would that match the results that you typed out for the partial DNA profile for sample E05?
Yes.
What do we have here?
So again, we at D3 locus, we have a 16 allele that reaches our analytical and stochastic threshold. That's why it's duplicated here. VWA, TPOC, CSF, and VWA, D16, CSF, and TPOCs, all no results. Y indel, we have the 2.
Let's skip the no results.
Okay. D2, we have a 10 that meets our analytical threshold but below stochastic. At D22, we have an 11. Again, potential for additional alleles. This means there could be potential dropout. We're not seeing all the data that could be there. They don't reach our threshold. We can't be confident that it's all the DNA that was there.
And any conclusions be made from this sample?
No.
So what if I showed you a known sample and see the 16 is there, and it's like the knowns I have don't have 16? Can you still make a conclusion?
No. So the process of the DNA workflow, aside from the lab portion, once we analyze the data, we are looking at the data to, one, determine if it's single source or a mixture. Once we determine that, we're looking at how many alleles are present and if we can make comparisons to a reference sample. If we can make comparisons, we'll make comparisons. If not, the process stops there. So it's a stepwise effect. If we deem it not comparable after our first look, we're not going to go back and compare references to it.
What if I ask next?
we still wouldn't do that.
You just got to follow your guidelines.
Exactly.
And you don't want to breach those guidelines.
Exactly. We have to follow our SOPs. And again, the final report and all the data gets a second eye and is reviewed by our supervisor and technical leaders. So all the data reported is reliable against our SOPs.
So in the end, no conclusion.
No conclusions on this.
Okay. Let's go to the EPGs just to kind of show what kind of peaks that we're still seeing.
All right. So we have the 16 here. Again, the 16 is the allele. The 611 is the RFU. So that just barely gets over our stochastic threshold. Remember, our stochastic threshold was 600. So once an allele reaches 600, it's reported as a homozygous. This is our bacterial artifact that we already talked about. At Y indel, the 2. And even at amylogena, we have a peak, but it doesn't reach threshold, so we have no results there. At D2, a 10 at 125, just made analytical threshold. Remember, analytical is 125, stochastic is 600. And then on this side, we have D22, again, another 11, more additional peaks, consistent with the mixture, but too low level and too partial for us to make any conclusions on it.
Now looking at the slope again, we're seeing some peaks in the other loci, and they're kind of going down. The more right you go,
Right.
that consistent with what you're seeing on the other sample.
Right, ski slope. I could draw a line right there. That's what's happening.
So there's some information there, but nothing you can designate as an allele other than the ones you did.
Correct.
Go on to E6, E06. And what is that item?
E06 is item E-12A, an impact filter from 3 pieces of red strap.
Did you do a quantification analysis of that?
Yes, E06 had no human DNA detected and no male DNA detected.
And did you receive any DNA data that you can, above your analytical threshold?
No, this was reported as no results. No DNA profile obtained from item E06.
And we will look at the EPG for this item. Not even much activity there, is there?
Right, so you see, starting to see a pattern. This is our bacterial artifact that we've seen throughout the samples from the MVACs that were collected from items in the grave or near the grave. And then we have additional peaks, so this one peak, and this might not still be distinguishable from baseline. So again, no results, nothing above my thresholds that I can be confident in, no results.
You just kind of push that one aside and move on to the next one.
Correct.
Okay, EO7 we're going to skip. Let's go on to EO8.
EO8 is item A25A, and that's an MVAC filter collected from bread strap from inside grave A.
And did you receive some partial profile results on this item?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you the next slide. Does that represent your results from E08?
Yes.
And what can we, well, did you do a quantification of this item?
Yes. For item EO8, we have less than 0.001 nanograms per microliter of human DNA and no male DNA detected.
And what do these results tell you, if anything?
This is, again, this is indicative of a partial profile in which we wouldn't be able to make any conclusions. You probably got a pattern by now, but the VWA, that 18, we know it's above my analytical threshold. It's not above my stochastic, so there's a potential for additional DNA to be present, indicated by the 3 dashes. YNL, we have the 2, indicative of the presence of a potential male contributor. And at amylogenin, we have just the X dash, indicating potential dropout. And at D2, we have an 11, again, above our analytical, but below our stochastic, possible additional alleles present.
And any further conclusions be made from this other than a possible male contributor?
No, that's the only conclusion.
I'll look at the EPG for this one. There seems to be, again, the same kind of thing. There's some registered allele.
Right, and then we have our ski slope effect still. Our bacterial artifact that we saw in all the samples. And again, we have additional peaks. It could be another contributor, or just low-level partial that we can't make any conclusions to.
In the D8 that you're looking at, does that look like it would be a possible mixture?
Here?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a potential for that. This is high baseline as well, potentially high baseline, but this could be more than one contributor.
Any others that you see that could be a potential mixture? Maybe D12?
Yes, again, additional peaks, but again, too low level to be confident in that. That's why we make them partial profiles, no conclusions.
Other than that, you're still seeing the degraded slope effect?
Right. And we did see an additional bacterial artifact in this one.
And which one is that in D13?
D13, yes.
And last item is sample E09.
E09, that's item A-26A. That's an MVAC filter collected from the right cup of a black bra. Item A-3 from the brown.
And did you have a partial DNA profile results from this one?
Yes.
And I'll put that up. This appear to be the results that you typed out.
Yes.
Without going through each individual locus, some of the things that I guess we see the male contributor, correct?
Correct. We have the YNL present. Again, only a male would have that location. They may not specifically have a 2, but they would only have the YNL location. And at amylogenin, we also have a Y that's actually calling as a minor allele.
And so, is there anything else you can say just from the results of what you see from a conclusion standpoint?
Yes, this one is also indicative of a mixture, as I explained before, in a single source sample. At most, we would see is 2 alleles at a location. Once we look at the EPGs, we can see if they're indicative of mixtures. In this scenario, for this particular sample, we actually have 4 alleles calling here, and we have 3 at multiple locations. So this is indicative of another contributor being present, so more than one contributor.
And other than that, can you tell us anything about, well, what was the conclusion on
this sample was reported as a partial DNA profile consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male contributor. For this profile, we also could not make conclusions or comparisons to.
and what is that?
It's still too low level and too partial to be confident that all the data is present, as well as it being another contributor present and no major contributor. So we can't parse out one individual from this mixture.
And part of your note said due to potential
Allelic dropout?
could you explain what you meant by that?
Yes, so that's indicated by the dashes that we've seen throughout the tables. This just means that, again, it didn't reach our thresholds that we have set. And because we're seeing the ski slope effect and the low-level partialness of the profiles, we can't be confident that the alleles that are present are all the alleles that should be there, per se.
And let's go through the EPG for this. Couldn't fit them all on one screen because there's a lot of notes on them.
All right.
So are we seeing again the same sloping effect?
Yes, so data is lost as we go from left to right in each channel. And we're strong over here and start to lose information, even though over here it's still kind of low. It is low. We see ski slope. Same over here, same over here. But again, you can see multiple alleles are being called. So that's indicative of more than one contributor. So at most, if I have 2 contributors, I should have at most 4 alleles, right? Mother and father, 2 people have parents. If they each get an assortment of DNA, we're having 1 allele from a mother, 1 from a father from one individual, 1 allele from mother and father of another individual. In this situation, we know that it's a mixture, but we cannot parse out how these would go together. It's way too partial. There's no major contributor. All we can say is that there's at least 2 contributors, and that there's at least 1 male, because we have the Y and we have the amplification artifact from Y and del. And this is at many locations. Even here at D2, we have 3 alleles being called that reach our analytical. And we have 2 additional ones here that are below our analytical threshold, so they don't get called. Here we have three alleles, and again we start to see the degradation, the sloping effect. Even here we have more alleles, and we have additional peaks that potentially could be alleles. Same over here, and even more low-level data here. So again, this one was reported as a mixture of at least 2. We can't definitively say it's 2, and we can't definitively say it's 3, so we stick with at least 2, and at least 1 male contributor. No conclusions on this.
And that bit of the last.
Yes, so same scenario here. The purple channel seems to do better. But this kit just seems to be more sensitive. But we still have the loss of data across. It gets a little bit weaker. But multiple contributors based on this location, based on seeing peaks here, additional peaks there, throughout the profile.
Now going back to your results here, you got a lot of numbers on that result page.
Yes.
Let me ask again, real nicely. Did you do anything with it?
No, we cannot make any comparisons to this partial mixture DNA profile.
So then, if I can go off of monitor. Let's get to some conclusions you can make. First, were all the samples run and completed and checked for contaminants from Bodie personnel?
Yes.
And there's no contaminants in these samples from Bodie personnel?
In the final reported profiles, no contamination.
All the samples were too low for comparison, for manual comparison by Bodie?
Correct.
you're not allowed to compare anything to any known samples based on your profile.
Correct. Based on our reporting of the partialness and the incompleteness of the profiles, we cannot make comparisons to them.
And all the testing, all the grams are done, or generated raw digital data, which can be saved and forwarded on, correct?
Yes, the data is saved off our instrumentation, and then when requested, we will send that data to exterior labs.
Is that the kind of digital data that we saw here that could be sent off for probabilistic genotyping?
Yes.
And when you were done, did you forward all your raw data, your case report, case all bench notes and everything back to the requesting party?
Yes. Our case file, final review file, the printed EPGs, our bench notes, and all the raw data.
So from everything we saw in the samples, would you opine that all is consistent with being a degraded sample?
Yes, these samples are consistent with being out and exposed to elements, and over time, and at least degradation based on the profiles that we develop. We have a ski sloping effect throughout all of the samples. We have low quantification data. It's not much to work with.
So if we had all the items that were represented within your samples, the physical items, if they were collected by some crime scene personnel, properly packaged and properly stored, so they didn't have degradation due to their storage.
Mm-hmm.
And if during that process there was contamination after it was collected, either by the personnel collecting it, the person sampled before it got to you, if that happened, would anything be present that would highlight that possibility it was contaminated after collection from the scene?
After collection, no. We will run the profiles through our staff and visitor database and make sure our controls are reacting appropriately. But before the items of evidence come to our lab, we have no control of it. But if the items are packaged properly, as they should be, and most agencies have technicians who know how to process this evidence and send it to our lab, we wouldn't expect any contamination.
Let's say there was. Let's say a technician with my water bottle. They have their gloves on, but for some reason they sneeze.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, I don't know. They get some kind of DNA on it. If that happened in one of the items you tested, what would you see of a contamination of something after collection from the scene?
So based on these items and how the rest of the profiles look, we would expect to see much more DNA in our electropherogram data, in our raw data. A contamination event after collection or during collection would be fresh deposit DNA, freshly deposited, more recent, not affected by the elements or time as the original evidence. So we would potentially see much more DNA than just the degraded profiles that we had.
And would you see more complete profiles of the person that contaminated the item?
Yes.
So if I sneezed on this, you would see likely markers at all the locus
Loci. Mm-hmm.
Smaller one. And you would probably be able to put up a profile of me saying, oh, look, Jim screwed up.
Right. We would be able to source it. A lot of times we do have officers submit their DNA profiles if we see a sample that is much stronger than we anticipated.
From your analysis, is it fair to say that the DNA you analyzed off of the samples you did, and the 8 we talked about, all the DNA that you sampled was likely on the items when they were pulled out of the ground, that's where they were recovered from?
Yes, so we could never say when DNA is deposited or how, but based on the case scenario and the DNA profiles that we developed, they're consistent with DNA profiles from degraded items or items that have been out in the elements, therefore making the DNA profile degraded.
And one last question, I want to go back on sample E09. Did you do a quantification?
E09, yes. E09 quantity at 0.00442 nanograms per microliter for human autosomal, and it had less than 0.001 nanograms of male DNA detected, so it was inconclusive for male DNA. we're detecting a small portion of DNA from a male, but not enough to conclusively say male DNA was present. Obviously, when we amplify the product and produce an EPG, and we can see the Y or the Y indel that is present, we can conclude that male DNA was on that sample.
So the peaks that we saw that you could not say is a true allele, that's the type of information that a probabilistic genotyping would look at.
I believe so, not for star mix in particular. I'm not familiar with how TrueAllele works, but they do look at all the raw data that's given to them.
And your raw data was forwarded on to cybergenetics effort.
Yes.
You're around nothing further and probably get time for break.
Sure, we'll go ahead and take our afternoon recess. It's been 15 minutes. Keep in mind the admonitions not to inform or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss anything about the case, witnesses, testimony, exhibit parts or attorneys. See everyone like that.